right, so we are here with Sean Bailey. I'm going to change my view right here. Awesome. Hey, Sean, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you just came off of a huge, huge win in Salt Lake City, and I know you're kind of like in between traveling. You're about to head to Europe. So I really do appreciate you sitting down with me and going through some of these questions. So today, really the focus, what I wanted to talk to you about was the decisions that we make and how that leads us to where we are. And like, I think it's really fascinating. And I think you've had some really interesting turns in your climbing career and life that kind of just led you here. So thank you again for joining me. So we'll start with, I would love to know how you started climbing and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, well, my parents climbed, so they got me into it when I was pretty young. Yeah, I think probably the first time I went was when I was like 5 or 6 or somewhere around there. Not totally sure. Um, but yeah, I liked it quite a bit and started going to the gym more often and joined climbing team here in Seattle with my coach I'm staying with right now, actually, Tyson. And yeah, that's kind of it. Simple story, but yeah, got psyched on it and started taking it more seriously, probably around like 12 or so, and then yeah, just continued progressing from there. So
Yeah. Did your parents primarily like rope climb? Is that where they were taking you to go climb?
yeah, I guess like rope climbing or like my dad was like used to be psyched on like trad climbing and stuff, and um yeah, I think like first time I went probably was I outside, like maybe in like Index or something, like Lower Town Wall. Um, and then, but gym's a little more accessible, so yeah,
Yeah.
started going to the gym a bunch.
Yeah. And so you started climbing at around 6. So you decided, like, do you remember deciding, okay, this, like, I really love this. I want to be on a climbing team.
Mm, I don't know. I don't know if it's like that. I think it was just like something I like doing, and like it just kind of like snowballed. Maybe it would be the best way to describe it. Like I enjoyed it, and I was like pretty decent, and then I was going to the gym a fair bit, and then I started getting more. And then yeah, the climbing team just sort of happened. Like I think Tyson just like saw me or something, and was like psyched, and yeah, I like did a comp, I think. I did pretty good, and then and then he was psyched, and then I joined, and then it was like really like a little more regimented, but I was going like 3 days a week or something, and yeah, I think I don't know. I realized I liked it pretty early, but I probably didn't start investing like a lot until yeah, I was like 12, 13.
Okay. Yeah. And so at like 12, 13 years old, was that when you started competing on a regular basis and started to travel?
Yeah. Yeah, I think 12. Um, I want to say 12. My first national, and then I was there for bouldering and lead, I think, or not lead. It was top rope at the time. Um, and yeah, from then I was just competing like in the U.S. circuit until I aged out at like 19. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So during that time, maybe it was when you aged out. I know that there was a pivot for you. So you and I had worked together a little bit to do some strength training. We were working on deadlifting,
Yeah.
doing some like ring routines. Um, During that time, I remember you had kind of, I don't know if you necessarily stopped climbing, but you were kind of questioning where you were at. Uh,
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, that wouldn't have been the first or the last time, I think. But I think I was a little injured at the time too. Like I'd done something to my pulley in my middle finger, so there was that. So I wasn't climbing as much. But also, I do remember just not being like as psyched. Um, I don't know. I would say it wasn't necessarily like pivotal in the sense of like, oh, I'm gonna like do this, but or like quit or continue or whatever it may be. But definitely there's been multiple instances of like taking some time off and having that be pretty positive. I think even just to like heal the body and stuff, like taking, a month off here, or even a couple months here and there can really help, like both like motivation wise with like psych, but then also just like making sure your body's like healthy and stuff.
So your decision to essentially take time off was maybe based more on, okay, this is going to be better for my future if I take time off?
Yeah, I guess I'd say so. But at the time I was mostly just that I was over it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I wasn't like, oh, this is for my future climbing. It was just,
Yeah.
part of the process, I guess.
Yeah.
But now looking back and like, even recently, like I took a month or so off, like um at the beginning of COVID. And it's kind of the same situation where I just wasn't as motivated and psyched, and so I wasn't climbing as much. Um, but each time I come back, I think stronger.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think just like it's years of toll. I don't know. I think um, it gets your body really wrecked, and then you're not feeling as good, and you're not climbing as well, and then you're like, oh, I've been grinding for the last 6 months, and so then like taking that like little bit of time is like super helpful. And then you get back and it's like first time in the gym after like a month or something, and you're so psyched. Like the next like month of training is like the easiest month of training because you're just psyched to be climbing again.
Yeah. So when it comes to motivation for you, um, like you're using this word kind of like I don't feel psyched, like I feel kind of like beat down. Like what are some other indicators for you that you're like, okay, this is probably a good time for me to take some time off?
Um, well, if my body's hurting, that's a major indicator. But I think like motivation is like the biggest thing. Like I feel like especially with where I'm at now, I feel like I'm at a level where unless I'm like super motivated, it's hard for me to progress anymore. So I need to have like kind of that extra drive to be able to like get a little more out of my body than I'm getting now. Um, so if I'm not feeling super motivated, sometimes you just got to go through it and like, train anyways and train through it. But there's definitely times, especially if it fits in the schedule, like I don't have any like trips coming up or I don't have comps coming up. Like it's just good timing to like let the body heal. And I'll feel really good. Like it sucks coming back. Like the first like month, I don't feel as good, or at least 2 weeks.
Mhm.
But then once you're like back in rhythm, you feel so much better. And I feel like yeah, I don't know, like just healed, like fully healed and like recovered in a way that doesn't happen so often. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important to even like for folks who aren't competitive, that it's okay to take time off and let everything heal and maybe even reflect on maybe your past climbing ability. So is that like when you're taking time off, like what is it that you're essentially doing during that time off?
mm, um yeah, I guess normally just chilling pretty hard, I
Yeah.
guess.
Some Netflix, some video games.
Video games, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to be out in the sun if it's that time of year, that type
Yeah.
of thing.
Awesome.
I keep it pretty low key, I think. Like traveling maybe. Like I do like traveling just for traveling's sake, but I don't do it
Yeah.
very often. Like although
Yeah.
I travel a lot, it's always like it's pretty like goal oriented. Um, so
Yeah.
sometimes traveling without that is cool. But I do get bored after like about a week of that. I'm just like, I want something to do now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, it's always tough. That's how I know like I'm like psyched to get back into it, is because I can't be like I just feel like really stagnant, can't do it for too long. So after like a few weeks of that, I'm just like, okay, I'm definitely ready to start training again and like getting motivated again.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, you don't just gym climb, you also climb outside and you've had some really amazing ascents outside. Where does outside climbing fit for you in terms of like looking at your climbing career? Like, do you have more psych for one over the other?
Mm. Um, it goes in waves for sure. Sometimes I'm more motivated towards comps. Sometimes I'm more motivated towards climbing outside. But I think they can coexist. I would say there, it's all that's everything I care about. It's like hard climbing outside, comps for lead, comps for bouldering. They're all kind of like equal to me in terms of like what I'm motivated for in general. But then, looking more like specifically, there'll be times when I'm like, oh, really want to boulder right now, or I really want to sport climb, or I'm really motivated for comps. So it's just kind of like riding that wave of like finding the way to train for kind of everything at the same time, which is tough, but
Yeah.
then just using that training for whatever I'm like the most motivated for.
Yeah.
So right now it's like I have comps coming up that I'm very psyched on, but then after that I have outdoor projects. So it's just kind of like transitioning from, one area to the next.
Yeah. So in terms of your like climbing development, and it's awesome that you have parents who like took you outside. Like how much in like as a kid up through now was outside climbing a pretty big aspect of your development?
For sure, yeah. I
Yeah.
think I learned a lot about climbing. I think I learned a lot about the process, like red pointing process, or even on-sighting process, and just like the style of climbing is very different. So I think you learn a different skill set. Like I'd say like competition bouldering is like a totally new sport now compared to like bouldering outside, but you can learn something from both of those aspects, and you can use it in the other aspects still. Like you can find ways to like use some like, some tech skills that you got outdoors in a comp, or on the flip side, like maybe there's, some weird dynamic data you can find for, an outdoor project instead of like static, like power beta or whatever the classic is.
Yeah. What has been some of your favorite outdoor scents?
Mm. Um, I mean, yeah, most recently, this thing, Grand Illusion, is awesome. It's like these tufas on granite, and it's crazy. Yeah, it's super crazy, and it's a cool style because it's long. It's like 20, it's either like 22 or 25 moves or something. So it's kind of power endurance style.
Yeah.
Um, then on the opposite end of the spectrum, I climbed this thing, box therapy in Colorado recently. That's like very crimpy and like just perfect rock. Um, but like small holds and steep, and yeah. So
Yeah.
two opposite ends of the spectrum, but
Yeah. Awesome. And then I guess on the flip side for competitions, um, maybe like it could have been this last comp that you just did, but what has been like your favorite comp, or even like in terms of like groupings of boulder problems, specifically for boulders, have been like your favorite?
mm, um, yeah, I guess the thing with competition bouldering is you're not always supposed to like the boulders, so it's pretty rare to like all of them. Or
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever really like all of them. But there's definitely been rounds that I really liked, or boulders. I think more specifically, boulders that I've really liked. I feel like I still have a lot of comps to do. I haven't done as many bouldering comps as I have in lead, so maybe I don't have like the the best idea of which have been, my favorite. But yeah, I think like I liked the round a few weeks ago. That was pretty cool. It was like not the perfect round, like some things didn't go as they could have, but as far as like a round, I think it worked pretty well, and like everyone was trying hard. And the fourth boulder was like probably the coolest competition boulder I've climbed on.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe ever. Just like a crazy freak move.
Yeah.
Well set. So
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely seemed like that final round was very difficult, like,
it
maybe
was really
compared to.
hard, but it
Yeah,
was on the edge too. Like I think everything was possible, and
yeah,
like the right attempt, people could have done boulders. Like three was definitely possible, two was definitely possible, one and four got done. So it was. I think on the harder end of a round, but it was also in that area where it's like, yeah, all these could get, one or two tops, like if everyone climbs perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, so then when you're, like, in those moments, you're like, "Okay, I know that this is possible." Um, when you're trying to make your decisions for beta, do you have a certain way of going through that? Like, "Okay, I just tried this. What's your next step?"
Yeah, well, shit, yeah. I mean, that's the process I'm always working on,
Yeah.
right? But I think the beta side is maybe the simpler part of the like comp mentality for bouldering. It's obviously still pretty difficult and we get it wrong a lot of the time. Um, but there's a little less going on. In the final, it's cool because we all preview together and everyone's pretty cool with each other for the most part. And we'll talk about, what we think. And I had Zach there, who's from the US as well, which is cool because we obviously will say anything to each other, what we think is going to work. And then, some of the Japanese guys are like pretty cool too. And so we'll like bounce ideas of like what we think is the way. So you have a decent idea before you even try. Like what a lot of people are going to try. And then you obviously have your own ideas as well, but it always climbs different too once you actually get on the boulder. And so generally I'd say if try something with 100% effort, which is really hard to reach that 100% effort. That's like near impossible. um I think there's always a little more, but if you can get as close as you can to that and it feels like you can do it that way, then okay, maybe I'll try it again. But if you get really close to that 100% effort and you weren't able to do it, then that's when it's okay. Well, like, what do I change here? And I think on a lot of comp boulders these days, like it's not necessarily like big things you're changing, like not really drastic. Sometimes, but not always. But a lot of times it's even just micro adjustments, but just making sure that there's something that you're going to change in the next attempt and then making that change, trying again. And then if it works, it works and you do it. If not, then okay, how do I add to this? What do I change for the next one?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, trying 100% because that's how you get all of the information, or at least as much information as you can.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the key is to get all the information in as little attempts as possible because you don't have that many anyways,
Yeah.
and you get tired from them. So trying to like streamline that process so that you can, make progress quickly is kind of like the key, I think, to competing well.
Yeah. And so you just mentioned this, like, that's the physical component, like, that's the beta component. What about the mental side? What decisions are you making, or what things are going through your mind when, okay, I just attempted this, I fell off, I only have 2 minutes left. How do you manage all of that mentally?
Um, I think for me, just staying like process oriented is pretty important. I think if you're thinking about time, you're probably not giving a good attempt. If you're thinking about this is my last attempt, you're probably not giving a good attempt. So I think the key is to try to, at least for me, is to take myself out of that situation a little bit and just focus on like the process of what I'm doing, which is, you know, give a good attempt, make a change, give another good attempt, try as hard as you can, like the simple things. But if you focus on them, I think that's how you climb the best, or how I climb the best anyways, as opposed to like, oh man, I got 2 minutes left and I have to do this boulder. Because that thought will come in,
Mhm.
but I think the quicker you can push it out and just think, okay, what am I doing different next try? What am I changing? Let me give it a go. Like if you can stay in that mentality, then that's like how I find success.
Yeah,
Yeah. But
fantastic.
it's way easier said than done. Like
Yeah,
that's the hard part, I think, is like staying in it the
yeah,
whole way through.
yeah, and seeing, like, watched you several times in your competitions, and, like, I've seen different emotions come out from
Hmm.
you. Um, do you know, like, for yourself, what the best emotional stance is for you when you know you're competing really well?
Mm. Yeah, for myself, that's the hardest part. I know that I'm like a, pretty emotional person anyways, and definitely an emotional climber. And I think there's positives and negatives to that. I think in competition, it's like can be a hard mentality to balance, um, because you do feel those emotions. And I think, you know, as much as you want to like push them out, it's just unrealistic. Like I know that that's how I am and that I'm gonna have these feelings. So it's more about finding a way to actually like channel that into something positive, you know? So if I'm having a good comp, that's easier because I'm psyched and I can use that to, try to build after each boulder. If you do the first boulder, you're psyched, and the next boulder you have a little bit more, um, you know, just belief kind of that you're going in the right way. I think what's harder is like if you're having a rough round, or for me, if I'm having a rough round, or even just a rough boulder, some I'm not psyched on, that's when it's like, okay, how do I like let myself feel the emotion that I'm feeling, but then like channel it in a way that is constructive as opposed to, being destructive. So yeah, that's
That's
that's my
awesome.
crux and comps
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, I think it's, so I was a tennis player and I was actually kind of like, I would consider myself a mental case on the tennis court. Like I would have a lot of emotion. But I would say like more than 50% of the time it actually did help me. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't anytime that I tried to push it away, it really, that wasn't really serving me. And I think really like maybe the point is like if you are an emotional climber or an emotional athlete, that you can use that as almost like a superpower.
Yeah, I think so. I think you can use it really positively. And I think there's, other climbers that I've seen that seem to be pretty emotional and they have found a way to use that to their advantage. They're also a lot of times like the most inconsistent as well, though, which can be tough. So what I am psyched on is that there are some people that are pretty emotional but have found a way to be consistent. Um, and to always like channel it effectively and stuff.
Mhm.
um so that, yeah, that's cool, and it makes me think that I can get there as well
So
someday. Yeah.
yeah, and of course, that just comes with experience, and it sounds like you're gonna continue to learn with every comp that you're doing, and I know that with the lead climbing, it's much different. So it sounds like you've had a lot more experience in the lead climbing competition world.
Hmm.
Yeah. So how does that change for you in terms of like mentally preparing for a lead comp compared to like bouldering?
um I think it's easier and harder in different ways. It's easier because it's easier to stay in it because you just have one attempt. um it's a longer process, that one attempt, but it's only that one attempt. Whereas a bouldering round is like you're climbing, and then maybe you did the boulder, maybe you didn't, and then you're just sitting for 4 minutes or 5 minutes, or in a final, you're sitting for, you know, 25, 30 minutes. Um, so staying in it for this really long duration through like different highs and lows and different boulders is definitely tough. Um, lead is more about like getting onto the wall with like the right intention and the right headspace and like being able to give everything. And for me, it's like a combination of relaxation, because I think that's how you climb the most efficient on lead routes. Um, but then also being ready to like kind of crank the intensity as you get higher. So that you're able to, try it really hard when you're pumped. Because if you're too relaxed, then that, maybe you fall early, or maybe you get pumped and you don't really push that like extra one or two moves that you could have. Um, so it's kind of just the style of like being relaxed, but then like slowly like increasing intensity
Yeah.
as the route progresses.
Awesome. Cool. So I have a quote here from Mark Twain. Kind of
Whoa.
going back to the decision-making process. So, one of his quotes is like, good decisions come from experience, and experience comes from making bad decisions. So
Mm.
with that, like looking back at your life, your climbing career, like have there been moments when you're like, wow, I made a really bad decision?
Hmm. Um, I, yeah, I guess I don't really like the word like bad, but I definitely made a lot of wrong decisions. Which yeah, are bad decisions, I suppose. But I think in climbing you can also like not make a decision, which is even worse, and
Yes.
it's just as
Yes.
easy to do as, making a wrong decision. So I'd say making a wrong decision is pretty positive because it means that you changed something or decided, to do something different, whether it be with your mentality or with beta or with whatever. Um, so yeah, the more times you do that, you realize, what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I think the further you develop, like a lot of those processes become more subconscious as well, which is great because it's less for you to think about. And then it's more about like keeping a clear head as opposed to, being really focused on like the decision making process. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with that quote completely. It's like that's the truth of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's like a lot of specifics I can think of, but there was one, like this is classic, but when I was like 14 or something, I missed the final in bouldering at nationals, and I missed it by one attempt. And what had happened was I climbed this boulder and I forgot to match the finish hold, and then I dropped, and then I climbed it again and matched and topped it. And then I was, I don't know if they took, I guess they took 8 at that time. So I
Yeah.
was like ninth with one more attempt. And I was like, oh, like that sucks. But I match now. So
Yeah.
there's an example.
Boom, you just learned from that experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, it's interesting that you brought up the second point of like when if you don't make a decision, that's actually worse. And I actually think Roosevelt had a quote just like that, that indecision is worse than actually making a decision. So that's very
Mhm.
deep. Um, so then the flip side, I know that maybe this is a little bit harder to distinguish, but are there any pivotal moments that you're like, I'm really glad that I made that decision?
Um, yeah, I mean, sticking with comps, I'm pretty pretty glad. Uh, there's ebbs and flows, but like, uh, yeah, I'm glad I stuck with it. It would have been easy, I think. Especially in the U.S., like there's a lot of climbers who mostly climb outdoors or only climb outdoors, and it's like pretty accepted. It could have been like a totally possible trajectory for me.
Yeah.
Um, I'm glad that I kept doing comps, but there's always those times where you have like a bad beat down and you're like, man, why? Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But yeah, glad that I each time, even from when I was like quite young, like I'd always take like a bad beat, a pretty maybe not as well as I could have, and I'd be like, man, I just want to quit. But yeah,
Yeah.
not doing that. I'm pretty pretty psyched on now. It's going all right. So
Yeah. Well, we're glad that you stuck with it too. Um, okay, so I have a couple of questions here from some of my people in my coaching group. Um, what are some recovery strategies that you use between competitions?
Mm, um, yeah, just I'm probably not the best recoverer. Uh, yeah, I just rest. I try to keep rest days really minimal. Like if I really have something that I gotta do, like a comp or a project or something, like to me, like a rest day means like fully resting. So that's like not going on a hike, not really going on a walk, like not really leaving the couch. And it kind of sucks, but it's really helpful, I think. Like you can tire yourself out just by doing normal things. So trying to not do that. Um, Not all the time, obviously. I like to like live a fun life, but yeah. if I got a comp in, a day or whatever, I do nothing at all. But in terms of like specific recovery tools, I don't really use too many. I'll use like a Theragun type deal pretty frequently. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's about it.
That
Just
sounds,
resting hard. I think
yeah.
that's the key, like resting hard.
Yes, that's great. I think a lot of people will actually feel guilty about not doing anything. They're like, I'm just sitting here. Like, I could be
Yeah.
doing something to make myself better.
Yeah, I feel guilty too. It sucks, but you got to do it, if
Yeah.
you want to perform. So,
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
But knowing that I have, you know, it has been successful, I think will make me less, I'm not actually that guilty. I just, it still just kind of sucks to do nothing. But
Yeah.
but yeah, knowing it works, if you just try it once, I think,
Yeah.
and you're successful with it, then you're like, okay, well, this works. Like if I rest, then I'll be successful. So
Do you have consistent rest days in your training cycles?
no, yeah, it fluctuates a lot actually.
Okay.
Um, I've tried like so many different training cycles. I don't think I do that many like proper cycles anymore. Um, I yeah, I just kind of try to feel out what my body is telling me
Yeah.
more often than not. Um, if it's telling me to rest, I rest. But that also comes from a lot of years of like pushing it and seeing how if I can progress when I'm really, really tired. Or if I progress more, being a little more recovered. So I kind of have like a good gauge of like how tired I'm trying to get, um, or how beat down like I'll let my body get. And so then I just kind of keep tabs and like if I feel like I'm in that zone where I need to rest, I'll rest. But and also like just cranking intensity at times. So I think it makes it easier to not have like a really strict plan because if I know I have a comp in a month and I have this like 3 week block where I can train really hard, then I can kind of dial the intensity up for
Mhm.
that time and then deload.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not that regimented for me. It's kind of just whatever I'm feeling.
Yeah. Oh, that's
But
good.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, I think recently I've been doing like 2 days on a lot of the time, 2 days on, one off, sometimes two off
Mhm.
has been working pretty well.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes I'll just go 1 day on, 1 day off for like a long while. And that works for me pretty well too, actually. But the problem is the intensity has to be super high. So I
Yeah.
have to be like really motivated to put in like a 5 hour session,
Yeah.
with high intensity the whole way through, which can be tough at times. But if I'm motivated like that, then I'll go kind of like 1 day on, 1 day off type thing, or even like 1 day on, 2 day off, just to recover before a comp.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that is really great to hear from you because, like, at least all of the research, the more that you let your body recover, the stronger you come back. Kind of like it sounds like even when you take your big chunks of time off, like your body just feels so much better. So if you can integrate that into your training cycles or whatever it is, like you have somewhat of a strategy that has those times of just rest and recover, you're going to
Yeah,
come back stronger almost every
yeah,
time. Yeah.
yeah. I think for me, the problem with having like a strict schedule has always been that I think you feel a lot, in the process, or in a cycle. Um, and you can use that information to make your cycle better. And I think when I adhere really strictly to whatever I wrote down, you kind of lose that whole aspect because it's like, oh, I said I was going to climb 2 days here, and then I said I was going to rest. But the reality for me is like some days I can push it and I'm gonna because I'm gonna get the most. And then other days I don't feel that good, and it's like, well, maybe let's rest. So I feel
Yeah.
like it makes it so I can get the most out of my body on any given day, as
Yeah.
opposed to like this is the schedule. This is what I'm going to adhere to. Like having the guidelines and the idea is cool of like, how many lead sessions I want or how many weightlifting sessions I want or whatever it may be. But those are kind of just like almost guidelines. And then on the day by day, I kind of just do what feels right.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a smart way to go because your body doesn't know the day of the week. You know, it's like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
like Wednesday, I'm supposed to do 10 lead climbs. Uh, yeah, I think that is like really smart. And it's cool that you have learned that about yourself and able to apply it. Sounds like really well.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. I
Awesome.
think it's just trial and error.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to push it a little too far at times and not far enough at other times. Then you kind of from both both
Yeah.
sides kind of come into what works. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I have another question here from Allison. She's saying she's asking at a World Cup competition. Let's see. She's kind of asking a two-parter. At a World Cup, when you turn around and you assess a problem or a route, and you say to yourself, "That suits me." Like, do
Mhm.
you like make it positive? Or if there's a hard section, let's say there's a hard section, and you really need to step up, like what is going through your mind as you're essentially reading the routes or the problems?
Mm. Um, well, for bouldering and roots, I think it's quite different. Either way, if it suits me, yeah, I'm definitely psyched. That's good. Um, any positive emotion you feel, you gotta like let that be a building block. I think that's really important. Um, for hard sections, if they're boulders, I try to get that first idea of what I'm gonna try, which maybe is it's hard to figure out, or even you don't find the right way. Sometimes it happens. Like it happened at the last comp on a few boulders for sure. I just couldn't find the right way. But it's more like trial and error process because you can give it an attempt and then try to improve or change for the next one. For roots, it's more like more and more I just try to have like a few ideas for the hard sections and not being that rigid, and just knowing, oh, maybe I'll try this way or maybe I'll try that way, and then the closer I get to it you can start seeing it a little better, and then I'll kind of decide, and if there's a rest or something it's like a good opportunity to like pause for a second and look and then make the decision of what's going to work. But I find that like I like using my body to like decide what is gonna feel well. Like I'm kind of feeling based, I'd say, where like I'll just do what is natural feeling. So just
Mm,
having the ideas like more abstract initially lets me like when I get there, um, make the right decision, hopefully. More
yeah.
based off feeling though at that point.
Mhm. That's awesome. You definitely are like one of those intuitive climbers because you move really well, and I think that I don't know that maybe a lot of competitors feel the same way of like intuitively moving into the climb or into those sections. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's also just like knowing how you operate as a climber. Like, because I know like really good climbers who are a lot less feeling based and they're like much more analytical and they're like amazing climbers. But I think they know that about themselves. So because of that, they have a slightly different process. So I think it's just like kind of making that analysis of like what's the most effective, for your own body and your own climbing, and then like pushing the mentality as far as you can. So for me,
yeah.
it's been thinking less, but for other people, it might be thinking more. So
Yeah. Well, actually, so with that, like kind of expanding on that, like since you're kind of on the intuitive side, have you had to have like moments or intentional practice of, okay, I have to like I need to start working on the rational side to round out your ability?
um well, yes and no, I guess. I think I think they're both processes are always going to happen. Like, there's always going to be a thinking component and there's always going to be more of like a moving and intuition component. For me, it's been more about like making each of those processes good and then knowing when to use which process. So there's definitely been progress in like figuring out when I need to be more analytical and then how to be analytical, but then also when to turn that aspect of it off. Um, but it's very, it's hard for me to think about, I guess, because it's very like fluid seeming,
Mhm.
you know, because even on a boulder, like I might have like a moment where I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? How am I going to try? And then another moment just a second later where it's like the exact opposite of that. And I kind of just turn off and do it.
Amazing. That's very wise. All right. So her second question, this one's hopefully an easy one. When competing, which do you find mentally more challenging? Lead climbing or bouldering?
Bouldering for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's different for everyone, but
Yeah.
for me, bouldering definitely mentally tougher. You're in it a lot longer. There's like a lot more I don't know, there's just like more stimulation in a way where you're like see one boulder and then you're waiting, then another boulder and you're waiting, and like there's just a lot of time. Like there's downtime, which is tough because you have to like be in the right headspace through the downtime. And then there's like, pretty intense moments of time too, where you have to like have the right mentality. So being able to like stick through it the entire way is hard.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, well, that is it. Those are some of the questions that I had from my people. Um, well, thank you so much, Sean. This was awesome. Some really wise words from you. It was fantastic.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's great to see. Like I haven't really had a chance to really talk to you since you kind of like left Seattle and I like stopped working at Vertical World.
Yeah, it's been a
Yeah.
minute.
But you've always been a wonderful human being, and it's great to see you like really excelling in these things. And like from my perspective, seeing your process over the years has really just been like really, really cool to see your cycles. And yeah, like super proud of you. Yeah, and I wish you all the best for your next comp.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
Cool.
it.
All right, thanks a lot, Sean.
Yeah, you too.